Hi, Tejal. It's good to see you.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's a sunny day in North Carolina, and baby finches have nested on my front door in my wreath that I never took down um, at the end of December. So they're bringing me the most joy, these baby birds growing and their mom feeding them. So I feel pretty good today in this moment. How are you doing?
Oh, that's lovely. As you say that, I'm realizing I have really lacked a connection to nature in like the last 4 weeks, basically because I don't leave the house. I'm doing what I'm told to do. And that sounds really nice, what you just shared.
hmm If I can get a picture of them, I'll send it to you. They sort of tuck back into their nest every time I go out to just snap a picture of them, and the mom flies away, which makes sense. But I would love to share a picture of these baby finches with you because they're fluffy and fledgling. They're starting to flap their wings a little, and it's just everything for me right now.
Yeah. Aw, that's lovely. I think my thing right now is brownies.
Everyone has their thing, right?
Yeah, I don't think we would have brownies as often as we've been having them otherwise, and that's pretty excellent.
That's good. That sounds good, actually. Yeah. So I want to thank you for saying yes to this conversation about grief and all the things connected to that and COVID-19. And I would love for you to share about who you are and what you do in the world. And you can answer that in whatever way is most resonant for you at this particular moment and point
Yeah,
in time.
sure. Well, I like to introduce myself by full name always. My name is Tejal Patel, and it starts with a T sound, TH sound, although it's not spelled that way. And my name is just a big thing that I always like to introduce myself with, but I don't think other people really get like, oh, she's using her name to introduce herself because it's something that gets erased often. So my name is Tejal Patel, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am an Indian American woman, first generation. My parents moved over from Gujarat in India in the 60s and 70s separately. And I'm a yoga teacher. So a lot of what my yoga teaching is focused on is understanding people's unique aspects of their identity and then creating community that welcomes that. And it's taken me a long time to get to that phrase, that very distinct phrase, because I felt like I've done so many things. How can I really say what they all are in one phrase? As so many people who do branding and marketing have told me. Um, but over time, it's kind of boiled down to that. And that's something that's come up and come out since I've been in quarantine, or I'm not in quarantine, but since I've been staying safe at home. So that's like kind of big picture who I am, and then how I implement that in the world is through Tejal Yoga work, which is workshops, classes, other education, coaching, mentorship for teachers. And um, I also co-host a podcast called Yoga is Dead, which is hosted by myself and another Indian American yoga teacher. And so we use that platform to talk about issues with the yoga industry that we've experienced and that we see going on, and our longstanding issues, but somehow have been normalized. So we're bringing a light to that so that people can really take back some power
Mm-hmm.
if they've been harmed by the issues that we call out. And I organize a community called ABCD Yogi. And that's kind of a multi-part explanation because the letters ABCD mean something. I'll start with the D. The D stands for Desi, which can mean anyone who has roots from the South Asian diaspora. So that's Desi. And the ABCD is actually a reclamation of a term, any born confused Desi. And so that would be a term thrown upon like Indian Americans, or what I've learned, Indian Australians or Indian Africans, as being confused about being Indian and. So kind of like being within two cultures, but not getting it right.
Mhm.
And I always felt it was insulting, even though it's like tongue in cheek. I always felt it was a little insulting. And so I created this community called ABCD Yogi, and I just took back that term and call it Any Born Conscientious Desi Yogi. And it's essentially a platform for South Asian yoga and mindfulness teachers to share their stories and practices with the global community, open to everyone, as a way to kind of raise the voice of this community that I feel is being erased systematically from yoga.
Mhm. So much powerful work and good work in the world. Thank you for doing it. And thanks for sharing what ABCD stands for, because I didn't know. And you know, I was curious about it before. And so thank you for sharing um, more about it, and the practice of reclaiming that and shifting the term some to fit who you are and the work you're doing in the world. So thank you. Um, and I'm wondering how your heart is given all that is going on in this moment related to COVID-19. And there's so much going on. And you're in New York. And how is your heart?
Yeah, I'm in the epicenter. My heart is in a state of stress. It's like a physical, emotional state of stress. So physically, I don't feel that every day, that state of stress, but I just know that if you carry something emotionally, there are physical impacts to that. And what I mean by state of stress is that I'm having to respond to outside of the normal circumstances. So I'm having a stress response to things that are unusual from my day to day. And um, I'd like to hope that it's just stress and that it hasn't shifted into traumatic stress yet. And it hasn't become, acute traumatic stress, which will then become post-traumatic stress. I'm hoping that whole timeline doesn't take place. But I think it's important to state that I'm just like living in a state of stress, and that I've been responding and reacting to everything going on because of my nature. But that is kind of all snowballing in this state of stress. And so when things start to normalize, which I'm hoping they are, because I'm recognizing, how stressed I am, I can start to find more space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hope that happens for you as well. And I'm just wondering if you could share some about your stress now and how it feels different, right? Like just what you're experiencing, and what you're experiencing is different than what I'm experiencing. I'm in North Carolina, not New York, right? And I'm not in the epicenter of this. And so I just wonder if you could share more about your reactions, because you talked about trauma and then what it can turn into. And I also think there's anticipatory trauma too happening, because we can't control what's going to happen in the next moment. And many of us have never faced this. So what are you noticing as far as your stress response that's different given COVID-19?
Um, I think I'm noticing that, like, my tri-doshic nature is out of balance. I'm noticing where I'm leaning into things to do things more or differently, and that's increasing my stress level. So I know that I'm Pitta Vata with Kapha like shortly after, but right now I'm like in a create mode. My brain is constantly worrying in things that I can create so that I can sustain myself, should this situation be sustaining. I'm in this pitta mode where I'm executing constantly, and I'm refining what I'm executing. And, if those are the things that I'm doing, I don't have time for that groundedness. I'm not taking that much time to reset, rest, and rejuvenate, which is hilarious because I love teaching restorative yoga, and I understand the benefits of it. But I think that embodying that right now is the reality of the situation for me. The struggle to embody that is the reality of the situation for me. So I've had to go through certain things where I'm like, if I dwell on that, I need to take the weekend, or I need to take 4 days to really like process that and move through it. I need to potentially pay some people who can help me heal. And like, I can't do any of that right now. So I recognize that I can't do that. Maybe that's a mindset that I need to work on, or maybe the reality is that I'm focused on surviving right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say that you're probably focused on surviving and like basic needs being met, and moment to moment how you're going to respond. Um, and again, I'm aware that you are in New York, and um, I don't have that many people that I'm close with that live in New York. I do have some people, and I'm wondering if there are losses that you have experienced or that you're just acutely aware of, given that you're there. And people obviously are dying in other places too, but I'm wondering if you could share some about your experience of loss during this time, or losses you're just aware of.
Yeah, no, I definitely have an answer to that. When you say the word, what have you lost during this time? My wedding date, my lead up to my wedding, all of that is a loss in the moment. And it's hard to grieve that because everybody wants to pacify it. Everybody wants to stay positive. And the reality is that I will have a wedding, right? It will just be at another time. But I have to communicate the cancellation. I have to organize through the cancellation, and the effort and the energy that it takes me personally to do that is exhausting. And I don't think it's that well received. Like the personal energy expenditure, it's not that it's not well received, it's that it's not necessarily understood and felt by others. So what I might need to accommodate that, it doesn't really make sense to other people. So then I'm in this constant push and pull of communicating what I need or how I need to discuss this with everyone that's involved. I have a huge family. They don't have any issues asking, when is it? What's happening? How are you holding up? Here's what I think you should do. And I don't have the ability to hold space for all that right now. So for me, I just end up retreating. And that obviously looks standoffish. So that's a tricky situation. On top of that, my family is pretty amazing. And we've had like 3 Zoom calls with over 30 people in the last 4 weeks. But I don't want all the questions. I just want to enjoy the company of my family. So dealing with that has been hard. We have a box of 500 invitations in our house that will never be used. And right now it's really tricky because just today received a text message from my parents saying that so-and-so's uncle's brother, which is how it works in our community. Everybody knows everybody. So the relationship, it doesn't matter how many steps away. It's like, we're going to talk about it. We know them. They just passed due to coronavirus. And so did X, Y, and Z. So did this other person because we know them through X, Y, and Z. And then my parents have to carry that, and they have to sit with that at their age and go through what it feels like to be in a situation they never could have expected, when they made all the choices to be in another place in time, like change their whole life up, separate from their family, and come here for freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom for education choices, and other income and financial stability. And then now they're like, they're stripped of that choice again. So I can't even imagine what they're feeling right now. So that I just found out today. And then everything in between then. I mean, we started COVID with the realization that bridal showers getting canceled, bachelorette's getting canceled, probably the outfit fitting, which definitely got canceled, and the wedding. And now we're going 4 weeks later, and that's the news we got today. Like, people are dying. and people are dying outside on the street here. We didn't find out the zip code by zip code, the issues of the cases for coronavirus until like a couple weeks ago. And we have a hospital in our zip code. I mean, we have we have the higher range of cases in our zip code and many of the zip codes now that we know the information, which just even more impacts on the fact that I haven't left my place. We are getting our groceries delivered. Like, we've got it made. We've got space in our apartment, so if I don't have to leave, I at least have room to walk around, whereas other New Yorkers are in their studio apartments. And and the housing developments that are just outside the corner, like, what is going on there? What's the communication that's going on there? Like, it's a stressful time because there's collective stress. I won't say that there's collective trauma, because I don't know how people are processing what's going on, but we are in a state of stress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, you just uplifted the way in which we're not experiencing this virus, right? We're not experiencing it in the same way, right? And I mean, we're not experiencing it in the same way, and people are not, based on their identities, based on where they are located, based on their access to healthcare resources, based on systems and systemic racism and oppression. And so I appreciate you naming that, because I feel like there's a narrative that dominant culture is perpetuating. It's that we're in this together, which we are interconnected. I'm not quite clear we're in this together, because we're having different experiences. And there's the narrative that it's the great equalizer, and which is confusing to me, because it's just revealing injustices and inequities, and equality is not rooted in injustice. And so I just appreciate you naming the different levels and layers of this experience, because I think we have to continue to center that truth.
It's so true. The other thing that's weighing on me, if there was only like a few things, is what's happening in Michigan right now. Michigan was the third hardest hit state. The governor extended the stay at home through April 30th. And because she limited certain services, a lot of the services, she limited a lot of services that people could access. She limited, Michiganders going out on their boats, going to their second or third homes. There was a protest on the steps of Capitol Hill yesterday. And it was essentially a Trump rally. And the reports were getting back through the nurses, the friends that are nurses, through the news of people in the healthcare facilities, are completely different than someone saying these restrictions are too tight. And the people that are dying in Michigan are the people that live in Detroit. Mm-hmm. And it has never been more apparent. I mean, it's been increasingly apparent, like, how racist this country really is and how deep rooted that thinking is, so that it's normalized and we don't even call it what it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we're just sitting there watching people dying in our hometowns. And at the same time, other people are like, this isn't my problem. I have other problems, so take care of me. And I'm going to be the loudest, meanest voice. And I'm going to wave around my wealth and sway you to do what I want. And I'm just waiting to see what happens.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, you're describing like how the world turns, It's like you're just describing the path. It's horrific. I want to say that, but like you're describing what has always been. It's just maybe elevated or amplified or visible. I don't know, for some folks, and for some of us, we've known this, right? It's not
I think what it is like, I refuse to not respond, like to not be shocked by it. Right. Mm-hmm. Right now, even though it's exhausting, because it's obviously the case and the way systems operate, just as they're designed. It's like, should I be numb to that? I'm just going to refuse that for the moment.
Right. Mm-hmm. Which is a lot to hold on top of all the stressors that you named,
Yeah. And I'm not alone at all in any of this, right? So
right.
That could be nice. It's also like, I don't have space for some of the things people are talking about. Like, I want to be very compassionate to all of my friends, all the people in all the communities and their needs. And then I also recognize how I very much need to draw a line. Maybe it's a spoken statement. Maybe I just quietly am not part of that conversation any longer. If I can't hold space for someone who is using this time to look at patio furniture, I'm just going to leave the conversation. I don't need to tell you that what you're doing is wrong, but that's just, I can't hold space for you and that. And there are other people that will do that for you. It's just not going to be me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And a few other people I've interviewed have talked about boundaries and just how there's like no room for bullshit right now. Like there's just, I mean, there really has never been, but there's like really not. And I think part of that's because of how stressed people are and how they might be trying to take care of themselves, and just noticing the inequities that you were naming. And I think it's a practice to notice where you can put your energy and where you need to like actually protect your energy, which is what I hear you naming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's challenging and I think it's necessary, especially right now. Given the stressors you talked about and just everything that's going on, I'm wondering how you're making space for yourself to grieve as this is unfolding, this pandemic unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tricky question for me. This is a question I have been asked since last summer. What are the practices? Not that it's an unusual question, but it's just that I sat in therapy and therapist was like, what are your practices? And I was like, what? Say what now? And I was like, I like to watch TV, but that's escapism. Like, I recognize that for what it is. That's not me processing the things I need to process. It's not me using a creative outlet to work through what I need to work through, you know? So then I started realizing that that's like the Tomasic energy in me taking over. Like, yeah, I'm a couch potato. Totally. I'm fine with that sometimes. Sometimes that's what I need, but sometimes that's my habit and it overpowers everything else. So I have been doing more creative things. I have been doing more solitary things. One thing that I did early on was just like this art project on a Saturday. And I just did this art project where I hand drew out the feelings wheel. And it's such like a fun project, but it's also very productive because I refer to it all the time now. And so I have this like large scale hand drawn poster of the feelings wheel. And just like a lot of people, I found really a lot of joy in puzzling, you know? So I'm puzzling and I'm listening to audiobooks and making time at night to read, which has always been an aspirational goal. I used to do it when I was younger, but it would be like a naughty thing. It would be under the covers and stuff. And I want it to be like an adult thing, like I used to see in the Cosby Show, like nightstands, night lights on, you know, sitting and reading, and then it's time for bed. So I'm making time for that. And I am leaning into community, not just to be productive in what the message can be. So although I'm always like, well, this is a great conversation, let's put it online, let's share it with people. Now I'm just like, we could just talk. Like, we could just talk. I think that'll be really nice for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that, just what you named about the creative outlets, and also what you named about noticing our habits and patterns and recognizing that sometimes we just need whatever the thing is we're doing. Like I watch TV on my computer and like stupid TV, I don't even know what it is. And sometimes I watch it and I'm like on my phone watching. I'm like, you're not even engaged in, like you're not doing anything right now that is feeding your, what are you doing? You're distracting yourself with your phone and this dumb TV show. And so sometimes I just want to zone out that way. And other times it's like, I really, you know, and sometimes maybe I just need to not be in the energy of what I've been in and what it feels so intense to me, because I am an empath for sure. And other times I'm just doing that because I do it every night. You know, it's like, oh, every night this week I've watched this dumb thing. So I just appreciate you like naming that, because I think then we can practice discernment when we notice I'm doing this thing again. Okay,
Yeah.
do I want to do it? Do I need to do it? Maybe not. What else can I do? So I appreciate what you named.
Yeah, I also want to say that this concept of self-care, it's not a concept, it's a practice, but it wasn't modeled for me. And it might have been, and I'm still trying to unpack what it might have been modeled for me as. But what is sold to me here as self-care was not modeled to me. So it still feels very foreign to participate in some of these engagements, some of these practices. Like taking a bath was never something I saw my mom markedly spend time to do. It's a lovely idea, but it doesn't sit that well with me. And I'm okay with that. But for a little bit, I was like, is there something wrong with me? Because everybody loves these things, And I just don't know what it is that she did. And I feel like if I knew, I would really want to do it. I think about that a lot.
Have you asked her have you asked her about self-care or whatever, however you would describe that to her?
Yeah. I think I could. I don't think I've explicitly said, what do you do to relax? I think I've assumed that for her, gardening is a relaxing activity. I think now what I know, gardening for her is a productive activity. So I do want to ask. And I think we're very similar in that she loves massages and I love massages. And I think touch is like a huge thing for both of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a conversation I'm excited to have with her.
Mm-hmm. I'll be interested to hear what comes out of that if you choose to share it with me. Mm-hmm. I think that could be a powerful conversation, given that you're naming, you want to, sounds like, lean into more of taking care of yourself and not doing that for productivity or to produce something, but instead just to nurture yourself is what I hear and what you're naming. I asked you about grief and how you're making space for yourself to grieve. And I wonder if you could share some about why you think it's important for us. And when I say us, I mean community, collective, to grieve, to acknowledge it in response to COVID-19 and all of the things connected to this moment. Why is it important for us to acknowledge it and process grief at this time?
Oh my gosh, so many reasons, right? One is to be able to articulate these emotions, right, with another human being. There is power to saying something out loud, to putting it to voice, and looking into someone's eyes and saying something. And I think that whole exercise of communicating what you're experiencing and feeling is such a powerful communication. So often I think so often, and this is what a lot of therapy is about, it's just reframing, right? And so often we're caught in the cycle of telling other people what their actions are, rather than really saying that maybe this action made me feel this way, and then even going a step further and saying, I feel this way because I feel this way. Mm-hmm. And instead, it's like this loss of control and power. And like really that agency needs to be developed. I think it's a skill. Mm-hmm. So communicating is so important, right? And fumbling with the words and then having somebody listen and be with you when you fumble and just appreciate the beauty of working it out is really important. I also think depending on who you talk to, connections will be made that you may never have thought of. And that's such a valuable learning experience, which I think is why anyone who interviews anyone else for other people to hear thinks it's such a beautiful thing to do that, right? Because you and I can talk about 1,000,000 things, but somebody else could still listen and then use that as fuel for another conversation that then addresses 1,000,000 other things. And it really just takes people to put the conversations out there or the thoughts out there for that to spark. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, just because normalizing the way we're feeling and the reality of our situation is so important. And for for the yoga teacher community specifically, I find this is bringing up the relationship to money in such an acute way. And the mindsets and the blocks that we have around allowing ourselves to feel valued or to feel like we can earn off of our spiritual and physical emotional labor is showing up in such a real way that it's just that process all over again, right? How do I communicate this? What does it mean? Do I really feel that way? Or is someone else making me feel that way? Or is it really me? You know, and I've had a couple conversations specifically about money. I'm working through my own situation right now with loss of income, and then what does it mean to become self-reliant, because even that is tricky. I'm cutting out a structure that I have to work within, but I'm still relying on others to value my offerings. And so there's a lot to work through with money. I think if we start talking about what those things are, it can normalize the conversation, and people can start really getting into the practice of asking for what they need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many layers to what you said about just the last thing you said about money and what's coming up in the yoga community, and creating something and then people have to value it, and people being in a mindset of scarcity, right? Because we're also having to work in a different way, or perhaps we're choosing to work in a different way. I don't know. I think it's different for different people because we have different resources or access to resources. And how if we start to talk about these things, which are, all of them are, scarcity is so connected to fear and grief, right? That we can normalize the conversation and begin to elevate what we need, like to talk about that. So I appreciate that. Is there anything else you want to share about COVID-19, about grief, about yoga, stress, whatever? Anything else you want to name?
I think on top of this this mindset that don't tell me to be productive right now, I'll kill you. You'll get canceled. I think it's a really transformative time. So that I can appreciate. I can really appreciate the amount of transformation that people are going through, and hopefully it's a transformation towards enlightenment, right? The goal. But we'll see, and we'll see, and we'll start to take it in stride as we go. And I'm hoping that for myself, like I can start to breathe a little easier and take some more space. And that's really where, I'm looking forward to going.
That sounds lovely. I want that for you too, the space. Someone else I interviewed, my friend Vivette, she said, she was naming something about time and space, and that we're shifting our orientation to time and space because we have to at this moment. And it just reminded me of what you just named, right? About having space and, letting go of some of the urge to focus on productivity instead of just allowing yourself to be in space and time and to notice what's going on and what's around you, and when you can get outside to connect to nature. And
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point, and maybe I'll just end it with this, is that part of my self-care practice is like repeatedly affirming that I deserve space and I'm like worthy of the benefits that come to me. I'm worthy of the good things that come to me. And that's a self-care practice. That's like hard work.
It is just reaffirming that over and over.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for saying yes and for just making space to talk about this. And thank you for who you are in the world and all the wisdom you just offered us, and just the gifts that you bring forth. Thank you so much, Tejal. It was good to be with you today.
Yeah, it was so good to be with you, Michelle. It always is. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you.
You are your beating heart. ready cracked open, wide open, so